We're going to talk about a really vital part of your business career. It's mentors. I actually had 4 mentors throughout my life, really. I mean, apart from your parents. But we'd like to introduce you today to Paul Waite. This guy has worked with probably one of the best British business people ever. Richard Branson. You should listen to people like this. Find yourself a good mentor. Stick with them and learn from them. It's very essential. Today we're here with Paul Waite, and as I said before, I need to stress the value of mentors. With mentors, it's essential that you learn off people who have already done whatever it needs to be done in business. So if you'd like to just tell us a little bit about your background first, Paul.
I left school at the tender age of 16 and went where I was at Birkin Institute in Whetstone Lane, not too far from here.
Was it?
I actually got 5 GCSEs, 5 O-levels and 3 CSEs, as we called it at the time. But I'd made it clear that I decided, despite the fact that school wanted me to stay on, that I was going to go and find myself a job. So I ended up as a trainee at American Express when they were in Water Street, American Express Travel. And looking back on that now, that was either the luckiest or the finest opportunity for me.
So that as a
youngster.
Travel company?
As a travel
holidays,
company, yeah. Holidays, even before the days of business travel, which is now a big industry in its own right. And I was stamping British Rail tickets and stamping brochures and doing local deliveries and that kind of thing. And
so you actually learned your trade there?
Correct.
So was there a person that you learnt off?
Yeah, well, a couple of guys. I mean, I was 16. There were these two really old guys. They were 34. Frank Lowe and Peter Schuker.
Yeah, it seems old at that age.
Yeah. And Frank was the accountant and Peter was a senior travel representative. Frank's actually still alive. And apart from being taught the job, what American Express did a lot was they invested heavily in their employees. It wasn't a year went by where you didn't have at least 3 weeks, 4 weeks when you were on training doing training courses.
Vital, yeah.
But these guys also taught me about life as well, and it's strange really when you've got all your mum and dad and your uncles and that around you tend not necessarily to listen to them, but you listen to...
You don't believe your mum and dad, do you?
Yeah, you listen to people... Exactly. Or now I think back and think, I wish I'd have listened, in that particular sense. So they taught me a lot about life and about standards, and I think that, that's very important to have certain standards and ethics. And I remember one thing that, Frank and Peter said to me, they said, you'll have airline reps coming here, Paul, and they want to take you out for lunch and buy you a pint because they want to influence what it is that you actually want to sell. They want to sell their airline. Yeah. He said, we have a simple rule here. He says, they buy a pint, you buy a pint. Yeah. Even though they're on expenses, you pay your way because you don't want to be beholden to anybody. Yeah. And it's strange now that, after, sort of 50 odd years later, simple things like that.
Those rules stay, don't they?
Yeah. And then it was
So how did you progress from there?
Well, I started off as a trainee, then I became a supervisor, and then I'd said to the boss one day, I think I'd like to learn how to sell, because we said we need to. I'm handling Lord and Lady Pilkington's travel. I'm handling travel for Plessy Brothers, who were big in Liverpool at the time. Etc. And he said to me, okay, and he got hold of his car keys and he gave me his car keys. And I said, what are you doing? He said, just go out and start talking to people. I went,
face to face.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I love face to face.
So I started going on the car and I went to a place like Barthold Plastics in Barnsley and other places up and down. I remember driving around the wilds of Lancashire and Yorkshire, as a 19-year-old thinking I knew everything. And after about 6 months, I came back in and I gave him the keys and I said, Bert, I'm not very good at this. And he said, great. He says, now that you know that, now I'll put you forward for some training because it's important to understand what you're doing wrong and what you don't know.
You learn from your mistakes more than you
correct before you actually go, and then you'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
So at that particular time, I sort of said, look, I can't. One minute I've got Mr. and Mrs. Jones from Aintree coming down and booking the holiday to Benidorm with me, and the next minute I've got the secretaries at Pugs and Buggers demanding I get this ticket sorted out for around the world trip. I said I can't balance the both. I think we need to start a business travel department.
Right, yeah. So that's a separate,
that was
a whole separate business,
department,
isn't it?
Yeah. And so he sent us downstairs and we started up this business travel department, and that was the first ever business travel department in the UK at the time.
Yeah.
All right, and now it's a massive industry.
Oh yeah.
And massive businesses.
Yeah.
So the opportunity came to go through to Manchester. We'd started this little business travel office, so he sent me through there, and then we grew that, and then I was dealing with companies like Tootle and doing the same kind of thing. And then he said New York said we're going to open up a full service travel office in Manchester. So that's where.
So you ran the Manchester office.
Well, I ran the business travel piece, and then when we converted into the full TSO, that's when I became assistant manager, because you had leisure, you had the foreign exchange, you had the business travel separate.
So it's just starting to combine into one.
Yeah. Combine into the one.
Yeah.
You had to know all kinds of things. You had to know your audits. You had to know about cash control. It was it was one of the best ways. People say to me, what university did you go to, Gary? And I said, I went to the University of American Express. And I went, that's not a university.
Never heard of it. Yeah.
And I said, it was the best business school you could ever have, because I learned on the way up.
Job, aren't you?
Correct.
Really? Yeah.
And you had good people, around your ways. Going to your point before, having a mentor or a coach, which in management these days I think is sadly lacking.
Vital. We found people who come in here to learn or to do their trade, if you like, the crafters and things. I have some who listen to everything that we say.
Yeah.
I have some that don't listen at all. They don't last.
Well, they will, and it's again, that's just one of the stories, and it comes back to some of the things I'm doing now. But from Manchester. American Express decided that they were going to open up in Aberdeen in 1981. So they came to me and said, would you like to go and run Aberdeen for us?
Right.
So
far north.
Yeah, so I turned around and said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And they went, well, do you know what the conditions are? I said, no, I'll go and do it.
Yeah. Would that be at the time of the oil discovery?
The oil had already been there. This was probably 20 years after oil was discovered in the North Sea. And I got there at a time when the market was actually soft, but we had nothing. They took me up, they sent me up there. I lived out of a hotel for a while until I found a place to live. I'm the youngest ever manager, and still to this day the youngest ever manager in American Express at the age of 24.
Right, yeah.
And I had just a suite of offices, and that was it. I had no equipment,
no staff,
no phones, no staff. I had to go and get everything, and then also go and get the business. So again, that was
So would that be bringing like the Americans across and people like that?
No. We had, funny enough, we did have a relationship with Conoco, the oil company in the US, and we looked after them in London, and they had an office in Aberdeen. So we eventually managed to win that business over. But I actually won in the first week of being there. There's a supply to the oil industry, a business called McDermott who supplied the personnel to the oil rigs and everything. And they spent £700,000 a year on business travel. Now, £700,000 in 1980, 1981 was a lot of money. And I got that the first week.
Right.
And from that, over the course of the next 3 years, we actually outgrew the offices. We had to move to bigger offices, set it up as a full travel service office, because there were a lot of Americans in there, and they saw the name American Express, and they were members. They had their cards, they wanted all kinds of services. So we grew it. We grew it that way. And after 3 years, we grew Aberdeen to be the second biggest revenue producer for American Express in the UK.
Right.
So that's when they said, now you're coming south.
Yeah.
So they brought me down to the Haymarket, which is the flagship at the time. It's a hotel now. And I looked after what they call the the business travel centre, the 24-hour service, the visa department, a place called Central Ticketing, and that was probably my biggest ever, I think, managing
That's now
job.
the overall complete package, then, isn't
Correct.
it, by then?
Yeah.
And you're designating certain things to certain people.
Correct. Yeah, and it was I would you believe started the 24-hour service,
Right. Yeah.
and I ended up running the 24-hour service, and even I've sat there on Christmas Day, sat there waiting for emergency calls to come in, and that was important to prove to the staff that you understood their challenges, and you had to, you get down and do it.
I've done the 7 days and 7 nights.
Yeah.
And the 8th day as well. In between.
So anyway, then took that to the we then took that, we doubled the size of the revenue there in 3 years, and I wasn't actually in sales, I was actually operations.
Yeah.
Right, but I think what I learned at the time, and as it was pointed out to me, other people were buying me, not just customers, but the way I actually learnt to manage and to lead staff, and you need to understand the difference in that. You need to and I remember a lady from HR came to me one day and said, your thing we love about you, Paul, is that you really treat your staff well, you really develop them, and you really inspire them. And I said, thank you. He said, but you know what your problem is? I thought there was a but coming, and they said to me, you try to save everybody.
Yeah, you can't.
And he said, what you've got to do is, while you're spending your time working on people who have got performance problems, who don't intend to improve, and you're determined, the good people are being left behind. So find out the ones that have no intention of improving and move them on and concentrate on the good people, and you'll see it shoot up that way. And it was perfectly true.
We actually call that, I learned that from a guy in Legal and General, a guy called Bill Loughnane, and we actually call that feed the strong.
Yeah, that's great. I've never heard that before, so that's really good.
Yeah,
that's really
that's
good.
What he used to say, because I'd go in and he'd give me a bunch of leads and he'd say, sort these out, and I'd say, well, there's loads of guys need all this. He said, you'll sell to every one of them. I said, well, what's the theory? Feed the strong.
Feed the strong. Yeah, I like that. It's a good one.